Tony Martignetti nonprofit radio coverage of 19NTC. You know what that is. It's the 2019 Nonprofit Technology Conference. You know where we are. We're in Portland, Oregon at the Convention Center. Thanks for being with our coverage of 19NTC. This interview, like all of ours, is brought to you by our partners at Act Blue, free fundraising tools to help nonprofits make an impact. My guests at this moment are Vanessa Schnaidt and Gabriel Sanchez. Vanessa is Vice President at Cause Communications, and Gabriel is Director of Communications at First 5 LA. Vanessa, Gabriel, welcome.
Thank you, Tony.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
Good to have
Great
you.
show.
Thanks for taking time. Absolutely. So your topic is Ultimate Communications Toolkit, tried and true resources everyone can use. Ultimate Communications Toolkit. That's pretty impressive. It's not just the penultimate; it's the ultimate.
It's the ultimate.
The ultimate. All right, we're gonna see.
I'm nodding, but this is radio. Yes. Yes.
You can do both. That's okay. I appreciate your affirmation. Okay. Make you keep these promises. All right. Let's start with you, Gabriel.
Sure.
What belongs in a communications toolkit?
Well, every organization needs to tell their story. They want to tell their story in order to drive action and move things forward. And what we've learned, and what I saw, because my exposure to the kit was about 3 years ago, is that there's not a lot of learning in one place. And that's what makes this toolkit so great, is that it's pretty much everything you need to know in one place that you can start from. And in order to both tell your story, to engage your audiences, to talk to board members, to talk to donors, to engage members of the public, the people you want to serve, it's just a great toolkit in order for you to help drive understanding of what you're trying to do and to get people on board with your mission.
Okay, Vanessa. So what's in the toolkit? What are the components of our ultimate toolkit?
Yes. So the communications toolkit offers best practices and really practical advice for every communicator in your organization. So everything from how do you make the case within your organization for the value of investing in communications, to how do you put together a communication strategy to make sure that you have the right goals and tactics to drive that progress forward. And then we also get into a lot of different tactical elements. So more specifics around best practices in media relations or how communications can support fundraising efforts. So it really is meant to be a soup to nuts, very breadth-oriented toolkit to help communicators at any stage of their communications journey.
Okay, and who's developed this toolkit? Is it the two of you and the third person on your panel who's not here, Courtney Clark?
So
where's this from?
Absolutely. So the communications toolkit is authored by and created by Cause Communications, which is the first nonprofit to focus on communications effectiveness in the social sector. The toolkit was originally published in 2002, last updated in 2005, and over the last few years has been undergoing this massive expansion and update project that Gabriel, as one of our partners, has been contributing to, Courtney as well. And so although it is authored by Cause Communications, it's really important to us to make sure that in order for it to be as relevant as possible for today's communicators, we receive input and feedback from the very communicators it is meant to help. So that's where our colleagues like Gabriel come in really helping us identify what kinds of resources and information are going to be most valuable to them.
All right, and the toolkit is something that's available to the community without subscription, or
that's right.
What? Okay.
Yes.
Where can we find it?
The communications toolkit is available on the Cause Communications website, which is at causecommunications.org/toolkit. In addition to the toolkit itself, you can also find 5 interactive digital lessons that we put together with the support of Courtney and her team at Forum 1. They're a really cool way to get a taste for the rest of the content in the toolkit. So those lessons are on topics ranging from branding to media relations to competitive analysis to fundraising and measurement and evaluation.
Okay. Yeah, Gabriel.
One point
please.
I wanted to add, Tony, is one of the great things about the toolkit is that it's intended for a broader audience, not just those involved in communications, but those who might be leaders of organizations, or maybe they're involved in development or other sectors, because it helps those folks understand the importance of communications and the role it plays in order to help them do their jobs better. In many ways, and we've seen this in smaller nonprofits and smaller organizations, there's not a dedicated communication staffer.
Sure.
It's distributed, right? Or sometimes you have many people who are directors of development and communications. Those are two big jobs, right? And so having an understanding of communications is very helpful, and that was one of the original intentions of the guide, was to help just inform and make that case for communications within organizations so that they make that investment. Because communications is actually a time saver for a lot of leaders, for executive directors, CEOs of organizations, because it will reduce the amount of time they need to communicate, because they're essentially putting it all in one place, as opposed to having series of meetings and check-ins and putting out fires, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah. And I noticed Vanessa was very careful to say at the outset, this is for all communicators.
Yeah.
So you're echoing that. It's irrespective of your position.
Right.
If you're facing the public, well, maybe not even. This could be internal communications as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
I just had a breakthrough moment.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so
I'm trainable.
Wonderful.
All right. Okay, no, it's not about me. Go ahead. Say what you were going to say.
Oh, that communications these days is not just a role; it is a practice, and we want to make sure that the toolkit is there to support anyone in a nonprofit or social sector role, regardless of what their title says on their business card. Everyone is a communicator these days, and has an opportunity to contribute to expanding the reach and the impact of their organization.
All right. Now, since Cause Communications does this for the community so generously, we'll give a shout out. What does Cause Communications do?
So Cause Communications works to support nonprofits and foundations strengthen their impact and achieve their mission through stronger communications and marketing. So we do that by making available tools and resources and trainings for the sector, and then we also offer consulting services as well.
All right, awesome. How about First 5 LA? What are they about, Gabriel?
Well, they're all about kids. Did you know 90% of the child's brain is developed by age 5? That's a critical time.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a critical time. I know we're making a lot of connections here at NTC, but in a child's brain, you're making 1 million connections a second. So it is a critical time for childhood development. And so voters, in their wisdom, 20 years ago, dedicated a tobacco tax to help fund programs. And we've now shifted to advocate for early childhood development programs like developmental screenings, preschool access, and other ways to help kids grow, to be ready to succeed in kindergarten and in life. And so what we're dedicated to doing is helping improve systems, make them work better for parents and their kids, so that these kids grow up to do great things.
You have communications principles that I derived from not the principles themselves, but principles for day-to-day and long-term. Gabriel, you start to tick off the first of what I hope is going to be many communications principles that you're going to share with listeners.
Well, I know in my part of the presentation I made yesterday, I was talking about how it's important to think of all communication strategies and turn them inward for internal communications. I know you mentioned that earlier, Tony.
I did. My breakthrough moment.
Yeah,
Don't gloss over it. Please.
No, of course not. It's a great breakthrough
Yes,
because your staff is one of your most important communicators, right? They're the ones where, in the age of social media, where everyone has a public persona and they're posting on social media, everyone has the potential to be a spokesperson for your organization, whether you like it or not. Right? That's not to scare people, but it's also to remind them of the opportunity that you might have, in that you can reach new audiences if you're pursuing internal communications, which helps you with your organizational alignment, which helps you with your brand ambassador type of programs, as well as employee engagement. So if you're using internal communications for those goals, you're going to help build your brand in ways that you can't do officially through your official channel.
So boil that principle down to a sentence. What's the principle here?
Think of your staff first.
Okay. And then, of course, not to negate everything you just said, but sometimes I like bullet points. It's all I'm not sure my first 5 years were as formative as for my brain as
I'm sure they were. You're doing pretty good, Tony.
Not sure they were as robust as they ought to have been. Okay, Vanessa, you got a communications principle for us?
Sure. Just as Gabriel mentioned, to put your staff first, we also believe in putting your strategy first. So we do a lot of polling and surveys at our organization, and we've learned over the years that while more than 95% of nonprofits say that they value communications and its role in helping them achieve their mission, less than half of nonprofits have a dedicated communications plan.
Oh, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. Right.
And so the process of putting together a communications plan that aligns with your organization's strategic plan is a great way to make sure that all of your efforts are working in unison with each other, and that you can really prioritize your time. I mean, we all know that nonprofits have way too much on their to-do list and far too little time to get that done. And so a planning process can be a really helpful tool in making sure that you're focusing on the most important things first.
Okay. Have a communications plan.
That's right.
Can I say? Okay. Now, I presume the toolkit will help you develop your communications plan?
That's right. It goes over all of the basic elements of a communications plan. It even includes some tips for how to make the case for why your senior leadership should support the development of that plan.
All right. We have more principles, do we? Gabriel, you have another principle you can share?
I was talking about earlier in my presentation how you can apply a crisis communications approach, right, to internal communications when you're going through a time of organizational change. Now, I'll give you 4 quick steps for crisis communications, and I'll talk about how you can apply them internally. And that's, you want to be able to, one...
Somebody didn't silence their phone.
I know.
Gabriel just took ownership of it.
I know. I own
that's
it.
All right.
So, a crisis averted. Okay, so...
Yes, crisis. How are you going to respond to this crisis?
First
You've
off,
ruined the show.
I'll use this perfectly as an example. Number one, you acknowledge...
Let's assume it was a crisis.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. But number one, you would acknowledge the situation. Hey, my phone went off.
You took responsibility.
Two,
you didn't just let it lay there and let
Exactly.
everybody stare at it.
Exactly.
All right.
Step 2 is you take responsibility and you say you're sorry. So, Tony, I'm sorry.
All right.
And 3, you explain what you're going to do
Apology
next.
accepted.
I'm going to turn off my phone so it doesn't happen again.
Never happen again.
Never happen
Yes.
again. And then 4, when hopefully you invite me back, I can remind you, hey, I turned off my phone so that we wouldn't have the same problem that we did last time. So those
What
are
about the appoint the blue ribbon panel? Isn't that a
No,
part of the
you-
or is that
you could put
is that
that in
old,
there.
Is that old school?
No, you can do that. It's important to fact find, but it boils down to, in step 3, you want to explain what you're going to do, right? And so in
Right.
times of organizational change, it's the same thing, right? Because you've talked with plenty of nonprofits. They're always changing. They're adapting to new conditions, and sometimes it's hard because it's your staff that are going through that, and you need to be able to explain it to them. And sometimes some things don't go the way you wanted them to. You need to take ownership of that and explain what you're going to do to fix it.
Okay.
Right.
Oh,
So it's taking that same approach that you would.
applying crisis communications
And internally.
to your internal staff
Exactly.
in times of change.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And in many ways, the best crisis communications is actually pre-crisis planning, where you're averting crisis. That's what you want to
For
go
sure.
to. And
Right,
so if you think
right.
of it that way and you're applying those principles, that's an external strategy, but internally, it's a great way to keep people aligned, to keep people engaged and motivated.
Okay. Vanessa, have you? It's your turn. Have you got a communications principle for us?
I do, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret, Tony. So we hear a lot about the importance of nailing that elevator pitch, right? Well, I'm here to
Heard
tell
that.
you
Yeah.
that there is no single elevator pitch that is going to be the magic bullet for your organization. In fact, you need to tailor your message depending on who you are speaking with. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. There's no one-size-fits-all message. So it's really important that organizations, as they're developing messages, think about what is it that really motivates each particular audience group that you're trying to engage with, and then create a bridge between the messages that you are putting out there and the mission of your organization with what your audiences really care most about. So in a sense, it's using your audience's motivation to connect that back to your organization's mission.
All right. So, tailor your messages.
Tailor
Here I
your
am.
messages.
See, again, my fundamental brain capacity.
Yeah.
Tailor your messages. Yeah. Now, I have had guests who have gone through the exercise of having their board learn an elevator pitch. It sounds like you're welcome to disagree with other guests. And been on this show for 8.5. We've had the show 8.5 years. Certainly, everybody's not monolithically thinking. So, the uniform elevator pitch, not so helpful, you don't think?
Well, I think there's definitely a time and a place for developing that pitch. And it is important to equip your board members, for example, with some really simple talking points that they can use.
Okay.
But what's going to be most effective is if that board member then has the comfort level of taking that message and really making it their own.
Right.
Riffing on it, depending upon who they're talking to, depending on who they're talking to. So yeah, now I don't know that this guest was recommending rote memorization of the identical pitch for all 12 board members.
Right.
Maybe it was just talking points. But yeah, okay. And then you should be, as a board member, you should be comfortable enough to tailor that message, and as I said, riff on it based on who you're talking to, whether it's a funder or it's somebody at a cocktail party. Or a funder at a cocktail party.
You adjust, right?
Yeah,
based upon your audience. If
that
it's a
depends who
friend.
you're talking to.
Exactly.
Okay. Have we got more principles? Do we want to keep going this ping pong thing with, or have we exhausted communications principles?
Well, I was going to talk a bit more again about internal communications and how critical it is, and I think another principle is linking the two, where you should think about your external strategies. I know Vanessa was talking earlier about having a communications plan and strategy, and you should have internal communications in that same breath. You shouldn't think of it as afterward or a bolt-on or, oh yes, we got to tell the staff too. It should be within the same breath as you're talking about it. You have your audiences, your internal staff should be on that list as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be number one, but it should be included so that they're not thought of as an afterthought, but instead you're looking to engage them, because one of the principles I was talking about is that you need to love your staff, because those are the ones who are helping you to get the people you want, which is donors or media coverage or what have you. And they're there for you, and you have to respect that. And you also need to look at it too, where another way, a practical way to look at this is, if you can't sell an idea to your staff, the people that are most bought into your mission, that says, I agree with what you do, I'm going to show up here every day to do work for that, then maybe your idea isn't that good.
Yeah, okay. All right, so again, internal communications, I mean, think about your staff as you're planning your own communications.
Exactly.
Think about staff. Okay.
And building on the whole idea of tailoring your message to your audiences, it's also really important. Don't assume you know what your audiences want. But how do you find out what they want? Well, you ask them. It's a really simple principle, but one that is often overlooked by nonprofit professionals today. And asking your audiences or understanding what motivates them is a really easy way to understand what motivates them, how you can more effectively introduce your organization to them. And it's something that we did as we were updating the communications toolkit. So that's where we brought in communications directors like Gabriel, or implementers like communications interns or program managers or development directors, folks who maybe don't have communications in their title but have almost in a default kind of way become the primary communicators for their nonprofit. And so we brought them all together. We had several different workshops where we sat back and we really listened to what is it that you need in your day-to-day life. And we were able to replace some of our anecdotes that, quite frankly, were so old they have become folklore in our organization, with really wonderful insights that let us know what today's communicator needs in this digital era, where with the democratization of communications and social media, everyone has a megaphone on their cell phone.
What are some of the audiences that we might be talking to?
Sure. So audiences would include board members who are not only an audience but also a messenger for your organization. You might consider talking to your donors. Think about speaking with your volunteers, folks who interact with you, and also individuals who benefit from the services that your organization provides.
Okay. Could even go broader. I mean, journalists could be part of your communications plan? Or,
that's right.
Whether that's sort of outdated press releases, or though maybe people still do them just because you have to, but building relationships with journalists.
That's right.
Could be potential funders, people in the community, government, depending on the work you do. Okay.
Yeah. All of the above.
All the above, and then they use data. They want information in different formats. A journalist might want bullets that they can carve a story around or craft a quick interview for, and you'd have to know that they're on a deadline. Versus funders who would want be more data rich, more outcome driven, and not so much a headline and a lead.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think you hit on something there, Tony.
That's
yes,
twice.
you did.
Twice in 20 minutes. It's amazing.
I think the best point is
I'm stopping. We're wrapping it up right now.
is have a story. You have to have a story. You can't just say we're doing this.
Yeah.
It's great. You need to be able to explain it, and I'll give you a quick tip, and this is something that you it's going to help you connect. You want to be able to both, or three things. You want to personalize, humanize, and dramatize a story. You need to be able to make it in order for your story to be effective, you have to be able to personalize it. To say it affects people, it might hurt them or help them.
Yeah.
You need to humanize it, and so that way, in a sense of they can empathize with what's going on. And then you need to dramatize it. You need to say, like, there's some urgency there. We got to fix this, or else people are still going to be getting hurt. Because you can certainly talk about a number or statistic or fact and saying 1 million people, are affected by hunger every day, or whatever kind of fact and figure, but it's just a number.
That tends to be abstract. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we know.
You want to get
right. Storytelling, and I like your personalize, humanize, and dramatize.
That's right.
All right. We're going to move away from the communications principles now.
Sure.
You talked about some best practices for moving a printed piece online, and you say PDF doesn't cut it,
That's
or
right.
maybe PDF isn't bad, but it's not sufficient, maybe necessary because it's so common a format. But all right, so what's the trouble, Vanessa? What are we not getting right about moving our resources online?
Well, so PDFs are still a valuable way to share and communicate information, but as you've pointed out, it's no longer sufficient as the only way. As more of us are accessing resources from our phones, the action of downloading a PDF is really cumbersome and not very convenient for today's communicators. And so, as we've been updating and expanding the communications toolkit, we were thinking about, okay, how do we make sure that the content is not only relevant but as accessible as possible so that folks will actually use it? And in that process, we partnered with Forum One and came up with some really fun solutions for how can we break free from just relying on this PDF and taking some of the content and best practices and concepts from our toolkit and putting them into a format of these interactive digital lessons. So giving people a chance to learn by doing, giving them a chance to go through some fun exercises from the convenience of their phone. And so in partnership with Forum One, we've got these 5 great lessons on our website at causecommunications.org/lessons. And those cover branding, fundraising, measurement and evaluation, competitive analysis, and give you a chance to try it out right there.
I think one of the other great things, too, is that it's much more shareable. But the challenge you have with the PDF, if you find a great lesson, you say, oh, and you want to share it with somebody. Let's say, Tony, I want to send you a tip. I would say, download this PDF, look at page 15 in the bottom right corner for the tip I'm talking about. That's really hard to do.
Okay.
But if you have it where it's much more digestible in a digital format, much more shareable, and it's going to help you, you're going to get to what you need quicker.
What are some of these formats alternatives that we're talking about? What you're doing about, like visualizing data in obviously PDF, one dimension. Well, we'll talk about one dimension if it's a screen, but PDF not very rich in visualization. What are some alternatives?
Sure. So there are great infographics that you can put together, but something as simple as a poll can be really engaging. So putting together little bullet points and facts. So putting content together in smaller, digestible formats that it's going to be a lot easier to not only consume, but as Gabriel mentioned, share. So a wide range there of different ways that you can consume that information.
Okay.
And a lot of organizations, they have a lot of great content already in these PDFs, which is not to knock that, but it's an opportunity to look at what you've done in the past and think about how you can reformat it where it's much more digestible and shareable. So that way it doesn't feel daunting that you have to redo everything. The content's there. Just think of ways you can make it more digestible by asking what your audience is looking for, what has been the most interesting or what's the most thing you get most asked about as an organization, have that up front.
Okay. Yeah. I gather the PDF is not going away,
Right.
but it's no longer sufficient. Because this is the second panel where we're talking about. In fact, the title of the other one for yesterday was "No one is reading your PDFs." Something like that.
It was a great panel.
So,
I went there. It was great.
Yeah. So you stole their content and then you presented it later.
No,
later yesterday.
It was
We
very
were-
shareable.
Later yesterday, yeah.
we were aligned.
When you recorded it,
Yeah.
it made it so much easier to share.
right.
Yeah. So I maybe this, I guess yes. PDFs are no longer the end all.
That's
It's
right.
just,
And it
there's
was
so much more we can do visually.
Exactly. And it was really through that process of listening to our target audiences for this toolkit that we came to that conclusion. And so it was insightful contributors like Gabriel who let us know that it was okay for us to experiment and to get a bit more creative. So in this way, we let our audiences be a barometer for our risk taking.
Okay, we still have almost 3 minutes left together. Let's spend a little more time, or 2 minutes. What else did you share in your 75 minutes with your audience that we haven't talked about yet? Go ahead.
I was going to share one of the.
Okay, one each.
Well, it was
Gabriel,
great.
you tend to grab the mic, though. Go ahead. I'm conscious of it. Vanessa
you.
will get her share.
I wanted to share some information. We asked tips from our audience. What is the best piece of communication advice they received?
Oh, okay. What'd you hear?
And one of them I thought was fantastic. It is tell the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to put it in context with stories, but tell the truth. Great piece of advice.
Good, especially in our current political and government environment.
Yeah.
Tell the truth. Shouldn't need to be said, but it's important to say it. Vanessa.
Well, we also heard
else?
keep it simple, don't overthink things, and test along the entire process. And so, that really showed us that there was incredible wisdom in that room, and really the most important tool in our toolkit is each other. And there's an entire
Right.
network here, and so we're thrilled to be here at 19 and NTC to be able to tap into that wisdom and share it with our colleagues back at home.
All right. And the way they are sharing this wisdom is by having you go to causecommunications.org/toolkit for the ultimate communications toolkit. And you can also go to causecommunications.org/lessons for the PDF alternatives.
That's right.
All right. They are Vanessa Schnaidt, Vice President at Cause Communications, and Gabriel Sanchez, Director of Communications at First 5 LA. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you,
Thank
Tony.
you.
Great opportunity. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for being with our coverage of 19NTC. All our 19NTC interviews are brought to you by our partners at Act Blue, free fundraising tools to help nonprofits make an impact.